Welcome to this module, which is part of the Trauma-Informed Mental Wellness Professional Development series. This presentation is made possible by a grant from the National Youth Advocacy and Resilience Research Center at Georgia Southern University. The topic of Part 1 of this presentation is trauma in college students. My name is April Garrity, and I'm a professor in the Department of Clinical Sciences at Georgia Southern University. The learning objectives are provided here. Please take a moment to read through them. For those of us who work with adolescents and young adults, it's not surprising to learn that mental health issues have been rising within that population. Although there are a number of explanations for mental health disorders, certainly some of the individuals living with such disorders have experienced trauma. A history of trauma is among the mediating factors for the presence of mental health disorders among college students. What do we know about trauma among college students? Let's take a look at some of the specific evidence we have from research in this area. Trauma is pervasive in our society, and college students are no exception. In fact, not only do 65% of students entering college report that they've already experienced some type of traumatic event, up to 50% of college freshmen report experiencing a traumatic event during their first year of college. Research has clearly identified relationships between trauma histories and serious mental health issues, including major depression, thinking about and planning a suicidal attempt, and non-suicidal self-harm behaviors such as cutting. A recent meta-analysis identified numerous sequelae of trauma among college students. These include depression and anxiety, misuse of substances such as alcohol, social withdrawal and loneliness, a decreased ability to cope with stress, and problematic eating behaviors such as those consistent with disordered eating. In addition, college students may be particularly vulnerable to some of these symptoms as they navigate emerging adulthood, a developmental period marked by significant changes across several dimensions. In addition to the significant risk of mental health disorders, college students with trauma histories are also more likely than their peers to exhibit academic setbacks, such as lower GPAs, having a fixed mindset, which means that they may not believe they're capable of learning difficult concepts, greater academic stress, and poor classroom performance. They're also at an increased risk of dropping out of college altogether. Research suggests that certain populations are particularly vulnerable to the effects of trauma. These include those who are members of minoritized or marginalized groups. Minoritized or marginalized women may be at highest risk for negative mental health outcomes. Other populations that represent special cases in the literature are student veterans, students who were part of the foster care system, and students who have been victims of sexual violence. The last group, those who have been sexually assaulted, are likely overrepresented on college campuses. Data suggests that 1 in every 8 students experiences sexual violence while in college. Now that you know the current trends related to mental health among college students, as well as the significance of trauma and its effects, consider for a moment when you have seen the signs of trauma among your students. So, what can we do to support students who may be exhibiting these kinds of difficulties? Students will not always disclose their experiences, which is fine. Given what we know about the pervasiveness of trauma among college students, we might start by shifting our mindsets. When students are struggling with academics, we would do well to move away from framing the issue as what is wrong with this student to thinking about what might have happened to them instead. Behaviors are a form of communication, and we need to consider what students' behaviors are saying in order to effectively address them. Take the time to become familiar with the resources available to students so you can share information with them as appropriate. This could include the counseling center or campus offerings such as tutoring sessions. Finally, educate yourself about trauma-informed strategies and use them. If you would like a copy of this reference list for Part 1, please feel free to email me. My email address is at the top of this slide. The topic of Part 2 of this presentation will provide an overview of several frameworks useful for understanding and utilizing trauma-informed educational practices. The learning objectives are provided here. Please take a moment to read through them. First, we will discuss Carello's trauma-informed teaching and learning principles. Carello's framework was developed based on the 5 principles of trauma-informed care for human services organizations. These principles provide guidance for organizations and individuals within those organizations for addressing the needs of those they serve. They are ensuring physical and emotional safety, maximizing transparency and trustworthiness, offering choices, fostering collaboration, and promoting empowerment. Carello expanded those 5 principles to 7 to create the trauma-informed teaching and learning framework. She retained the spirit of the original 5 principles and also added principles focusing on fostering support and connection, social justice, and resilience, all of which are important for student success. Take a moment to think about how each of these principles can contribute to trauma-informed teaching and learning. In order to apply Carello's trauma-informed principles, we need to look for concrete strategies that map onto those principles. 2 additional frameworks that support the use of trauma-informed educational practices are Universal Design for Learning and the Transparency in Learning and Teaching framework. Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people, based on scientific insights into how humans learn. Although UDL is typically thought of as a model for reducing barriers and increasing accessibility for individuals with disabilities, applying UDL to our course development is also beneficial for creating a trauma-informed classroom. UDL is an ideal framework for considering trauma-informed practices because UDL strategies are designed to support learners of all types, both those with and without exceptionalities. This tutorial is grounded in the philosophy that trauma-informed practices also benefit and support all students, regardless of their trauma histories. The current version of UDL is a hierarchical framework that consists of 3 levels called principles, guidelines, and checkpoints. Principles are the foundation of UDL and include the principle of engagement, or the why, or affective activation, the principle of representation, which is the what, or sensory recognition, and the principle of action and expression, the how, or implementation of learning. Each principle is composed of 3 guidelines. For each of the 9 guidelines, there are 2 to 5 general strategies called checkpoints. Checkpoints are actionable strategies. This graphic illustrates how the UDL framework is organized hierarchically, with the principles at the top, then guidelines, which are the headings in each of the boxes under the principles, and checkpoints, which are the bulleted items within the boxes. Transparency in Learning and Teaching, or TILT, is a framework that promotes instructional transparency through simple and practical strategies. TILT was developed specifically to support students, including those from diverse or minority backgrounds, who may be more likely to have experienced trauma than non-minority students. The TILT Higher Ed website is a comprehensive resource for information about the framework, as well as examples of TILT Higher Ed practices and templates. TILT emphasizes the use of transparent practices in all aspects of teaching, including helping students clearly see assignment expectations and requirements, as well as why they're being asked to complete tasks within their courses. TILT supports a number of other specific transparent practices, such as using agendas for class meetings so students know what they will be doing during that session, and providing students with examples of completed work that meets the expectations of the assignment. By being familiar with all 3 of these frameworks, Trauma-Informed Teaching and Learning, UDL, and TILT, we can identify and apply dozens of trauma-informed educational practices, which are the subject of another presentation in this series. If you would like a copy of the reference list for Part 2, please feel free to email me. My email address is at the top of this slide. Thank you for participating in this module of the Trauma-Informed Mental Wellness Professional Development Series. We're interested in hearing about your experience and are seeking ways to improve opportunities to provide professional development on these topics or related topics in the future. If you're willing to participate in a brief survey related to this module, please navigate to our survey using the QR code on this slide.